this show, we pick pieces of pop culture that were important to us in a given year. We then discuss memories and dig into those movies, albums, shows, and more. I'm Pete.
And I'm Giff.
Hi, guys.
What?
I'm Brad.
Oh
Yay!
my God. I thought you were dead.
I thought I was dead too. I think I did die officially once.
What's it like?
I mean, I feel like Tony DeMira had me, and I think I was possessed by the devil for a while.
Oh.
I know I had amnesia.
I've seen you possessed. I've seen you on the golf course. It's probably about the same.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've been through a lot. That guy's, as gracious as he is, he really is evil. I mean, I've been through the ringer, guys. I'm just happy that I got out of there and I'm back.
Well, I just love that we had a soap opera type ending here to bring back our favorite co-host of the.
I'm glad that you guys are okay, because I know you were like with him as well, and that's it was scary.
Well, he didn't stop by our houses like he stopped by yours, so we just got to see him over Zoom.
When you died, Brad, I thought they left no doubt. The killer left no doubt about it.
Yeah, based on what you saw, Pete, you'd think I was dead.
That's right. That's right.
Because I went through a lot that night.
Oh, who did it though? Who did it? I know who it was.
It was Tony.
I think it was.
Wasn't it Andre?
Right.
I thought it was Andre.
Oh, that's true. Well, I couldn't tell, because they're twins. Maybe you guys talked to the good Tony, and I had the evil Andre.
We talked to the very good.
Although I
Teo.
believe they're both evil.
Okay.
Very good, Teo Penglis. Wasn't that a fantastic episode?
It was, guys. Well done. I applaud you.
Much better than this one's going to be.
He was great. And again, thank you a million times, Teo, for coming on and entertaining us with your stories and your experiences. So that was awesome.
And it was a little bit, rough, because I was a huge Days of Our Lives fan. And so I wanted nothing more than to help interview this guy. And instead he takes me and has his way with me for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. Hey, put the explicit warning on this one, Pete.
Already done. Yes. Wow. Okay.
Wow. Hey, Pete, what are we talking about tonight?
We are going to be talking about the movie Reservoir Dogs, and there's a very specific reason that I picked this movie, and Brad's going to love it, and Brad knows exactly what it was. We loved this movie so much in high school as our group. We had a group of, 5 of us, Brad?
It was you, me, our friend Haken, Griebel, and Hummel, who was on here at one time.
And Hummel's father.
And then his dad was also our English teacher, and he was an honorary member of our little club. We liked him so much.
He wasn't just honorary. We actually had the shirt made. So we actually had T-shirts made that said, "Beware of the dogs," with 2 G's. And so we all had numbers, like uniform numbers.
It said Reservoir Dogs on there too. Somewhere.
On the back, it said Reservoir Dogs.
Okay, yeah.
On the front, if I recall correctly, it said "Beware of the dogs."
I think you're right, and I forgot about that part. I thought they just said Reservoir Dogs.
And actually, a couple of years ago, when we were going through my parents' stuff, when we were moving them out of their house, we found the shirt. So I do still have the shirt somewhere. I should have wore it, but it's a little small. It's a little small for me. So otherwise,
you do need to send a picture or add. We got to put that out there. We got to show people these shirts.
Okay, I'll see if I can find it again.
So let's run through it. So I was number 24. So this is right out. The Twins, the Minnesota Twins, were really good, and we were all into baseball. They had won the World Series the year before. I was number 24 for my favorite player of all time, Shane Mack.
Right.
Pete.
We also, by the way, we wore these playing softball because we were on that church league softball team.
We did.
And I was
in my notes.
Yep. I was second base, and I loved Chuck Knobloch back in those days, so I was number 11.
Mm-hmm. Haken was 34 for Kirby Puckett, right?
That's correct.
I do not remember what Griebel was. He did not play softball or get out much.
I would think he would be double zero.
I think he was 0 or 00, but that might have been Randy as well.
I thought Hummel said. I just saw him the other night, and I thought he was 00.
No, I remember specifically Hummel was 8 for David McCarty.
Oh my
because
God,
he
you're
was the
right.
big he was the big up and coming star
Mhm.
that didn't quite pan out like he was
No.
expected to.
And then
But
Mr. Hummel was 99, I believe.
that might have been it. Yes, I'm pretty sure Griebel was either 0 or 00, and Randy was 99. But
Awesome.
my
What a
God,
time to be alive.
yeah, yeah.
Well, we would walk through Tyler at night, and we would walk as a group, like cool guys, like
In
we
slow
thought.
motion?
Well,
Slow
no, but
motion.
you could imagine.
Yeah, you can imagine how intimidating we were.
And we played it off. And now we did add the G though to dogs, so
Right. So to avoid any
kind of like adding a Z to something.
right, to avoid any copyright infringements, we didn't want Quentin Tarantino to be calling us. Who are these guys in Tyler mocking my movie?
Beware
Uh,
of the dogs. Oh my God, we were something else.
We were
What a bunch of
something else.
nerds.
Nerds. We were awesome.
Mm.
But we had fun, and that's all that matters.
That's exactly
And
right.
so one thing that I didn't quite recall about this movie that came back as I was watching it, I didn't remember how short it was. It's a good, quick watch. It's just over an hour and a
appreciated
half.
that.
Yeah, I did too. Which you think about, like most of these mafia type movies, usually these are the 2.5 to 3 hour epic movies, right? But this one was quick. You're in, you're out, and it's very well done. Very good use of time. And yeah, before I did have a synopsis, but before we get into that, I'll let Brad and Gifford give their initial thoughts.
So I believe, as usual, I was the first one to watch this, or got you to watch it with me. I had read about it somewhere, probably in Entertainment Weekly. I'd heard the buzz about this Tarantino guy. Of course, we didn't know anything about him. But I think I watched it alone for the first time. I watched it on VHS. We, of course, got it at our store where we rented videos. And I really liked it. And I sent it off to you guys, and we all watched it, and we all loved it. And we made these shirts, and it turned into a whole thing. So that was my first experience. We were in high school, and I watched it by myself, and just thought it was great at that time. Giff?
Well, for me, living all the way over in Russell, and obviously not being
you were
a
not
part
in the dogs
of the Reservoir Dogs, I think I'm like a lot of people in the world. I probably watched this after Pulp Fiction.
Probably.
Pulp Fiction came out in '94, and I'm guessing I watched this in Morris with the group that we'd rent movies on Friday nights or Saturday nights, and watched it there. So my guess is I probably saw the first time in '94 or '95, somewhere around in there. But absolutely loved it. I'm a huge Tarantino fan. I love so many of his movies and projects that he's a part of. There's a few different directors out there where when you hear that they're putting out a new movie, you sit up, take notice, and you definitely want to see what project that they're going to put out. So Tarantino is one of those for me.
I will echo what Pete said though too. When I first sat down to watch this again, because it had been a long time since I watched it, I was happy to see the running time of an hour and like 40 minutes because I'm like, oh, this will be, I can get through this. And I was kind of on a time crunch too, so it was great. And I think most of his movies are well over 2 hours after this.
No, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I think
yeah.
Pulp Fiction's over 2 hours, isn't it? Isn't it like 2 hours and 15?
I think it is.
Something?
I think it's yeah.
So I love it, and because it does have a very like short plot, it's one of those. Well, we'll get into it, like where it takes place kind of all in one thing. I mean, it's good that it's a short running time. It's right for the type of movie that it is.
Right. Absolutely.
Shorter, that is.
Yeah.
It's no
Shall
Passenger 57.
Well, that's true. Shall I go into my synopsis?
You shall.
Yes, please.
All right. Reservoir Dogs, Quentin Tarantino's directorial debut, begins in a begins in a diner with a group of men like us discussing various pop culture topics, from Madonna's Like a Virgin to the custom of tipping. None of these men use their real names, opting for color-coded pseudonyms such as Mr. White, played by Harvey Keitel, Mr. Orange, Tim Roth, Mr. Blonde, Michael Madsen, Mr. Pink, Steve Buscemi, who I love, by the way, Mr. Blue, Eddie Bunker, and Mr. Brown, Quentin Tarantino. The scene abruptly shifts to a wounded Mr. Orange being comforted by Mr. White in the backseat of a car as they speed away. We learned that a diamond heist organized by mob boss Joe Cabot, played by Lawrence Tierney, and his son, Nice Guy Eddie, Chris Penn, has gone terribly wrong. In a warehouse, which is the film's primary setting, Mr. Pink, convinced that the job was a setup, determines that there's an informant among them. Tensions rise when Mr. Blonde reveals he's kidnapped a police officer. As the men try to piece together what happened and betray them, and who betrayed them, the narrative goes back and forth in and out of flashbacks. The flashbacks illuminate the characters' backstories and the planning of the heist. We witness Mr. White's camaraderie with Joe, Mr. Blonde's psychotic tendencies after a stint in prison, and the intense preparation the team underwent. Mr. Blonde, revealing a sadistic streak, tortures the captive police officer for fun, even slashing off his ear, famously to the tune of Stuck in the Middle with You. He's about to set the officer on fire when Mr. Orange shoots him, revealing to the officer that he is the undercover cop. As the film races toward the climax, Joe, Nice Guy Eddie, and Mr. White confront Mr. Orange. A standoff ensues, leading to a tragic bloodbath. In the end, Mr. White is holding Mr. Orange in his arms, and the police storm the warehouse, and we are left with a cliffhanger-type ending. You don't know exactly what happened to Mr. White and or Mr. Orange.
I got a pretty good idea, though.
I think Mr. Orange
think so,
is dead, and Mr. White's going to jail.
I think Mr. White
Or he might
shoots
shoot himself.
Mr.
He might have-
Orange,
yeah, he
and the
might have
cops
shot
shoot Mr. White.
Right, okay.
That's my guess.
As
You
well.
didn't know but I'm
No.
saying you don't know exactly. They don't show it. You're left to your imagination because there's about 3 or 4 possible ways that could have gone. So, but none of them is good for either Mr. White or Mr. Orange.
Correct.
So,
Very well done.
discuss.
I think we're done here.
All right, see ya.
I did like how you brought up the opening and the pop culture references because that fits right in with what we do here on the show. And
Exactly. That's what I was thinking when I was watching it.
the talk about Like a Virgin is interesting and pretty good. The stuff about tipping is really good because Steve
Outstanding.
Buscemi, who's always great, as you said, he does make interesting points, but then Keitel defends women who are a lot of the times the people that they're talking about who work for these tips. And I mean, it's just it has nothing to do with the movie, but it's just a really interesting way to start it off but it gives you that, even though this is the first time you meet Quentin Tarantino, like you looking back, you realize, well, this is what this guy is all about. Like this kind of great dialogue and just these kind of interesting vignettes like that.
It sets up really well who these characters are and what their personalities are
Right.
like.
We meet
Because
all of
Steve
them, that's right.
Buscemi, you learn that he is selfish, and that plays itself out throughout the movie. Some of the others are professional, and they're generous towards people. There's a professional way of going about it, which Harvey Keitel alludes to later. But they want to treat other people or civilians well. They don't want anybody else getting hurt that's not involved in their plan. And so it's a much more minor than getting shot, but not tipping is kind of a part of that. So,
Well, and I think this brings right to light one of the things that I love about Tarantino movies is the dialogue. He writes just mundane conversations so well in a very entertaining way. I mean, you think of Pulp Fiction when they're driving in the car and they're talking about different burgers in France, when Jules went to France, like just mundane stuff, but it's done in a fun way, and he just does such a great job. And then of course there's the violence, which he always puts a fun spin on as well. But yeah, it's a great introduction to the type of movie that Quentin Tarantino makes.
So I love you brought up Keitel and Buscemi and meeting the characters. I love how those two are kind of together for most of the movie because they are great opposites.
Yes.
Keitel, the straight-laced, serious kind of guy, and Buscemi, the kind of annoying and kind of out for himself. And they play off each other really awesome. But what you just said, Gifford, about the dialogue, I already had two connections I was going to make, and now I'm going to make the connection 3 times. So what else do we watch and talk about that has that great mundane dialogue that you just can't get enough of?
Oh man.
Clerks.
Well, yeah, but not TV show. Come on, guys.
Oh, okay.
Seinfeld.
Seinfeld.
Yeah.
So
Oh, okay.
as you're describing that, I'm thinking
yeah.
of, they're sitting in, what's that button doing on your shirt right there? Or who's the best explorer? The stuff they talk about in the cafe.
I always went with DeSoto.
DeSoto.
What did DeSoto? What did he do?
He
Covered the Mississippi.
yeah, like
Oh,
it wasn't
they wouldn't
already
have found
there.
that anyway.
That's
So
what it
anyway,
was.
that's my first connection to Seinfeld. The second one is, you brought up Lawrence Tierney, like the mastermind of all this. That guy is freaking great. And who is he, Giff?
He's Bennis's father.
Elaine's dad, who is one of the
That's
most
right.
memorable. So there's, when I think of like one-off characters on Seinfeld, the two that would come to mind are him and then Bookman. Bookman's the best. But her dad is just frightening in that episode, and you can feel the fear Jerry and George have. And even in real life, they talk about
real
the
life,
guy off his rocker.
That's why they didn't have him back on the show, because
Yeah.
he was so nuts.
So he is great for this role. I mean, especially if you know that he fits right in. And then the third connection is, I kind of already brought it up, but this being so closed in this one space, it reminded me of shows like that, like the Chinese restaurant, the parking garage, or the one on Friends, the one where no one's ready. We've talked about those where, they all take place in one place. And this one doesn't, but it uses flashbacks. But really, the whole movie takes place present time in that warehouse hiding place. So all those things made me think of, like, this is just a really violent Seinfeld here.
Violent
There you go. Nice. So would Tarantino be the Kramer? Because he's kind of the taller, goofy kind of dude. And
No, I think Steve Buscemi would be the Kramer.
you think so?
Yeah. I was going to say Michael Madsen's the Kramer.
Sure.
Well, that could be true.
Steve Buscemi's the George, just the neurotic.
Neurotic,
like,
yep.
annoying.
All right,
Shifty,
all right. I
ready
can
to
see
get the hell
that.
out
And
of there.
Keitel's Jerry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, we got it, guys. Good job.
Excellent. Good work. So Pete mentioned this is the feature film debut for Quentin Tarantino's directing. One of the fun things that I found on this was, of course, this is an independent film, so there was no studio behind this. It's kind of regarded as one of the best all-time independent films ever made. And we've got the producer of Lawrence Bender here. And so he gave the script to his acting teacher, who ended up giving it to his wife, who gave it to Harvey Keitel. And Harvey Keitel read it, absolutely loved it, and he put some weight behind it. He came on as an executive producer, and therefore they could actually get some funding to make this movie. And then, of course, not only do you have the money now and you can go do casting, but you have Keitel attached, and now you can get this cast that is just out of this world. I mean, holy cow, to think this is your first movie, it's an independent film, and you get this kind of cast put into it.
But how many of them were, like, pretty, I mean, so Michael Madsen, he was in Thelma and Louise, right? Which was the year before this.
I believe so, yeah.
He had been in stuff.
So
I can't remember if
Harvey
Steve
Keitel,
Buscemi
right?
really wasn't in much before this, was he? That would be, like, big or memorable?
Yeah, neither was Roth really either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
so
Harvey Keitel, I know for sure had been in things.
Yep.
It's just that whole thing. And there is one other cast member we haven't mentioned.
Chris Penn.
Well, yeah, but there's another one who you never see.
Oh, Stephen Wright.
Stephen Wright is
right. Yes.
I didn't know I forgot about, but he's the voice and you recognize him right off the bat.
The
voice
radio
on the
DJ, yes.
Well, and that was another thing I loved about the soundtrack, is when you got the CD soundtrack, all of those snippets from the movie are in the soundtrack. So like you start the soundtrack and it's the beginning conversation in the diner, and then before each song you get the introduction from Stephen Wright on the CD, which was really fun to have the movie dialogue on that soundtrack. So that was fun to hear him. I remember listening to this soundtrack quite a bit in college. I think my roommate Matt had it, so you'd hear Stephen Wright all the time.
And this is another, that's another thing Tarantino's kind of known for is music and good soundtracks or memorable scenes with music. Of course, the dancing in Pulp Fiction, and I mean,
Correct.
Well, in this one, I mean, the music is so opposite of what's going on, and it sort of accentuates the character itself, the Mr. Blonde's character. It's like it almost tells you how psychotic he is because it's sort of a cheerful, happy song
Right.
while he's doing this
Well, and he's dancing
horrific
around.
stuff. Yeah, he's dancing around and he's doing this horrific stuff to this guy.
Well, and when you hear that song, just out in the world, do you see anything other than that scene?
No, they are
Every
synonymous with
time.
each other
Yes.
now.
It's absolutely
Yes.
you can't get away from it. It's melded into your mind. Those two things go together.
Absolutely.
That's one of the iconic things. I mean, it's very early in the movie, right after they leave the restaurant with the slow-mo walking with all
Yep.
five guys, which, and of course, we talked about with swingers.
Swingers.
Mhm.
It just, looks so cool and just a great shot.
Yeah. For sure, absolutely.
Speaking of cool, I think when Michael Madsen shows up, he is a little sadistic, but I mean, just sitting there, leaning back, smoke. The guy is just like,
Has he ever
The
played
pe-
Elvis in a movie? Because he could play Elvis.
that's kind of what he comes off as, is just this cool character that, nothing bugs him, and he's just, don't get in his way though, because
Right,
it won't be pretty.
right.
Well, and I liked in the flashbacks, where you see like Keitel with what's the Joe, and then you see the scene with Matson when he comes in and he sits down with Joe and good guy Eddie or nice guy Eddie. Is that what it
Nice
is?
guy, Eddie.
And you can see the history there, and of course, his character is Vic Vega, who you assume in the Quentin Tarantino world is related to Vincent Vega from the next
That's
movie.
what I was
In
like,
Pulp
okay, I
Fiction.
know that name from this movie. I guess I forgot that is almost the same name. That's why it jumped out.
I always figured they were just brothers. They're in the same world. They're in the
You would
same
think so.
underworld, and they're in Tarantino's universe, I guess.
And
So
they're cool guys.
yeah, right. So I mean, it's fun to see that that interplay between him and nice guy Eddie. Almost like brothers, the way they wrestle around and all that. It was fun to see that.
I did like because that part where you learn he was in prison and that Joe is like kind of a father figure. I mean, he's a little more human in that scene. That flashback that's a good scene, and it's a lot of important information to the background of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Yeah. One of the other things that I really liked about this was during the torture scene with the cop, when he goes out to his car to get the gasoline, and you've got the music playing, and you just you hear the music fade as he gets to the car. So outside in the parking lot, it's a sunny, just regular day. You can hear traffic, you can hear people talking, just
Nobody
the
knows what's
goings
going
on.
Yeah.
And then, but just inside this warehouse, all hell is breaking loose, and this
Torture
music is
chamber.
just blaring, and this cop is going through hell. I just
There's
love
another
how-
guy
how-
dying.
Right, and I just love how you had the music just separating the two as he got further from the door, and then as he got closer, the music comes back in, and you're put right
And
back.
he's just looking so cool and casual. You would never report anything suspicious at all. If you were somebody driving by, you wouldn't think anything of it.
Right. Yeah.
Who is your favorite character in this movie?
Oh, that's a really good question. But
I'll go first if you need to think about it.
I got my answer though. I've got Harvey Keitel who is Mr. White. I think he is my favorite character, but it could easily be a toss up between almost every other one of the characters. But that's my choice.
I like Harvey Keitel. I like how he has a heart, like he believes in people. Like he totally believes in Mr. Orange, and like he's trying to protect him even when the other guys show up.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna go with Mr. Orange, Tim Roth.
Yeah.
So I didn't remember most of the what was going on. So when he shoots Mr. White or Blonde and then says he's a cop, I was like totally surprised. And I loved the whole scene of his backstory and how they described an undercover cop has to be Marlon Brando. And he's got to be this great actor. And learning about how he went through all that and then seeing him fit in pretty seamlessly. I thought he was awesome, and I love how I thought he was dead. I thought he wasn't coming back, and then all of a sudden he's important again. And he also ties in with like my favorite line where they're teaching him about the story he needs to tell to like pull this off, and
The commode story.
He says,
story.
"What is this?"
Yes.
And then the guy goes, "That's an amusing anecdote." And I just that's my favorite line in the movie, I think. So all that, and then you see him, and speaking of the direction, like you talked about the sound gift, probably one of my favorite scenes then with this is where he's telling that story, but you see him practicing it, and then he's still telling it, but he's in a bar with some of these guys, and then he's still telling it in the bathroom in front of these cops. So it's a seamless story, but you see him at all these different points where he was like nailing it down and learning it, and I just thought that was so cool.
Mm-hmm. The way it jumped back and forth, yeah.
So that's why I picked him. Giff, how about you?
I got nothing to add. It's Mr. Orange.
Oh, really?
Well, I shouldn't say I don't have anything to add. The one thing I will add is after you see his progression in his undercover game, when he's going out to get picked up in the car and he stops the last minute before he leaves his apartment, he looks at himself in the mirror and he has to pump himself back up, and he just looks at himself and says, they don't know shit. You're the coolest guy in the world. Like he just has to reinforce himself because, he is in the middle of the lion's den here when he's with these guys, and he keeps it up so well.
Right.
And his acting throughout, like when he's, writhing in pain in the back seat and he's absolutely freaking out because he's been gut shot, and he's, you believe that this guy is fearing for his life. He's absolutely awesome in this role. I love when he shoots Mr. Blonde, and he's talking to the cop that's in the chair, and this is more along the makeup side of it, but how pale he is because he's lost so much blood. I just love that little effect in there, because he's dying. I mean, he's on his last leg here. It's all he could do to sit up and protect this cop from being burned alive.
I love that in the backstory then too, once he is a cop and you're seeing all this, like then you get to see like in the diamond heist when one of the cops gets shot right in front of him, and you see his reaction, like he's
a woman
obviously upset, but like he can't do anything. He just has to like keep going. And so yeah, I think that whole character just ties the whole movie together is brilliant.
Yeah, I think the relationship and the reason I like Harvey Keitel too, Mr. White, and Mr. Orange, that their relationship, which you kind of touched on earlier, it's like he cares about him. Mr. White cares about Mr. Orange, and there's
tells him his real name.
There's a brotherly love there, and he desperately wants to save his life, of course, not knowing at all that he's a cop, and with Harvey Keitel, that scene early in the movie with him and Mr. Pink it looked like they're in a bathroom, but it wasn't really in a bathroom because they asked later, where's the bathroom? But
after when Mr. Pink first gets into the warehouse.
Right. And so they're having this conversation, and Mr. White is explaining some things about Mr. Blonde and how he's a psychopath, and it's like you got to be professional, and so how that setup was. I really like that.
Yeah. I just think the acting is so perfect in this. Tim Roth was just, he's so good. Just the way, and then when he's talking to the cop, and the cop is, feeling sorry for himself because his ear's been cut off, and Roth is screaming at him, I'm dying here. Like, you're going to be okay. By comparison, you're going to be okay. I'm in much worse straits. But the other thing I loved was when they first get into that warehouse, and Tim Roth's character is honestly panicking. He's like begging to go to a hospital. Like he knows that, hey, if I get to a hospital, I'm fine because I'm a cop. I'm not going to jail. I'm in on this whole thing. But then as the movie goes on, he tells the cop that's sitting there bleeding, he's like, I'm not giving up. I'm staying right here until the cops come through that, until Joe shows up and the cops can nab him. I'm going to see this through, even though he's on his freaking deathbed. It's absolutely It's very compelling to me.
Well, even the first scene in the movie in the car, or one of the first scenes where Harvey Keitel is driving him down, that whole exchange is awesome because it's like he's saying, "I'm going to die," and Mr. White's going, "I'm sorry, do you have a medical degree? Or what are your qualifications?" That kind of exchange I thought was good. How encouraging he was.
Just to try to call him another
it was
human
funny.
being.
It was funny, but how he was doing it, like I said, because he cared about him and he wanted him to hang in there.
So the one part of the movie I didn't quite understand was right at the end, after we got the Mexican standoff with Nice Guy Eddie and Joe and Mr. White, and they all shoot each other. And so Mr. White's in a bad way here. He's been shot, and he comes in and he kind of nestles into Mr. Orange, kind of holding him, as they're both, bleeding here. And he tells him that he's a cop. I didn't quite understand why he would tell him that he's a cop. I mean, the sirens are coming, the cavalry's coming. He's going to be, maybe saved at this point.
Well, let me answer that for you.
But I mean, in my opinion, the way Pete said, it's left up to your imagination. In my opinion, Mr. White shoots Mr. Orange in the head as the cops come in. So he's basically signing his death warrant, telling him he's a cop. So Brad
knows he's dead either way.
I think that one reason he told him it might be because he knows he's going to die. He's so close to dying, it's like doesn't matter. But I think there's that mutual respect. Harvey Keitel, Mr. White, cared so much for him for whatever reason that before he dies or before it's over, he wants to repay that to him and let him know the truth. And if he ends up killing him, he might die anyway. So, but that's also why I'm not so sure that he shoots him, because I feel like he might just let him go and see what happens when the cops come in, because
that's where my head.
Even though he didn't know he's a cop, he still respected him so much, and he was willing to tell him that I'm not sure Harvey Keitel shoots him in the head. Although I can definitely see him doing it. It looks kind of like he's going to do it, but we don't.
And maybe it's my just projecting after watching so many Tarantino movies that bloodshed is going to happen. So there's been plenty.
We've already had plenty of that.
Why not throw a couple more bodies on the pile?
If you look, though, if I remember correctly, the way he's holding his head, he's got his hand on this side and the gun on the other. If he shoots him in the head, he's going to blow his own freaking hand off.
Yeah.
Well, he might be so out of it, he doesn't even realize what he's doing.
He could have moved his hand before he pulled the trigger too. I would have. It seems like it would have been the smart thing to do.
Pete tends to move his hand out of the way before he shoots people in the head.
That's
I can vouch. You got a voucher.
we got a voucher. As long as we got a voucher.
All right. What else?
I have a few observations.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Not like big things. You mentioned when he looks in the mirror and he's leaving to go, he picks up his keys off of the top of an Inside Sports magazine. And that caught me because I used to get that magazine in high school. It was like the other Sports Illustrated. I got them both. I got Sports Illustrated and that. And I hadn't seen one forever. And I'm like, hey, I know that. Chris Penn, I think, sounds exactly like Jonah Hill. You could put Jonah Hill in that role.
Yes, they even look the same.
Yeah, they're like almost the same guy. Like I could see him playing that role if they did it.
I had actually that written down, that exact thing. Yes.
And then one last connection and tying into our podcast with the diamonds and the hideout area. Is this just a serious version of A Fish Called Wanda?
Sure.
It's pretty similar.
Serious version.
That I didn't think of, but
Mr. White and Mr. Orange are kind of the Otto and
Mr. Orange,
Jamie Lee Curtis of the movie.
He stashed the diamonds.
Yeah.
I see that.
That was when I thought of it, when he talked about stashing the diamonds and the one, like he said, Michael Madsen's going to run away. That's why I shot him, because he was going to take off after shooting you. That's where I was like, hey, wait a minute. This is A Fish Called Wanda.
Well, I mean, we do know that Tarantino is a huge cinephile. He takes his takes from all different movies. And so maybe Fish Called Wanda was one of them that inspired him in this movie.
Could be.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great pick, Pete. It's a wonderful movie. A great way for Tarantino to kick off his debut, as you like to say, in directing. So yeah, thanks for picking it. It was a great to watch it over again.
Yeah, I really was kind of happy to watch it again because it had been so long. I think it's so. I'm going to make one little criticism because I have to.
Oh no,
Sure.
I still think it's a really cool movie, and we talked about some of the stuff that stands out. Like it's obviously so well made. Like this is a director that knows what the hell he's doing. I like 90% of it. The thing that I struggle with the most about Quentin Tarantino movies is just the language slurs. I just get so tired of it. And like writing a part for yourself where you use the N-word over and over. I mean, it's not necessary. It wasn't necessary then, and it's even worse now looking back and watching it because you wouldn't do that really today. So that's just on my own personal. I struggle when I watch that kind of stuff, and it bugs me. But everything else about it, I thought was awesome.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I get it.
I mean,
I'll accept
even just
that as a criticism.
The opening scene where he's in with the guys, I'm like, this guy's kind of annoying. Like, I was so glad that he wasn't in the movie anymore because he was the one that I found annoying. And you give yourself some of these roles and some of these words to say, and it's like, I don't know. So that's
right.
That's my Quentin Tarantino criticism right there.
Sure. I hear you. So what do we have? If that's going to wrap
do you have
it
any
up?
final thoughts?
Do you have
I
any
just want to say, speaking of slurs, there is one that is brilliantly used, and I'm not going to repeat it. But it's the way that it was done was pretty funny, especially. I mean, the first time I saw it, I remember it was really funny. Now, looking back on it, maybe you shouldn't have used it, but it's when he asked it, when Buscemi says, "How come I got to be Mr. Pink?" and the response to it.
Yeah. Well, and that was a fun exchange. Was these guys trying to figure out, hey, I could be Mr. Purple. I don't mind that. Like that's okay. And Joe comes back with, well, there's another guy in another job who's Mr. Purple. Like you don't get to be Mr. Purple. I tried that once. Everybody makes up their own names. Everybody wants to be Mr. Black. We
didn't talk about it, but correct me if I'm wrong, unless I'm totally blanking. He gets away, right? Mr. Pink?
Yeah.
Mr. Pink lives, so that's
he's.
I mean, for as far as he could get away, who knows?
Well, and who knows? Maybe Mr. Pink and the diamonds. That's what ends up in Marcellus Wiley's case in Pulp Fiction.
There you go.
Could be, right? We never really knew what was in that case, so that could be the diamonds from Reservoir Dogs. So,
all right. Anything else to add before we jump into our draft of top Quentin Tarantino movies?
No, I think we're set.
Credits.
Because so here's the deal, Pete. You weren't even going to have us do a draft this week, and Gifford requested this, and he said credits. So these are things that he was in any way associated with.
Yep. Yeah.
So I went on IMDb and I looked at not just writing and acting and directing, but like producing bit parts. So some of these are things I didn't even know he was really with, and some of these are very tiny little things, but I had to stretch to get enough things to make sure I could do my draft here. So
pretty much what I did too. So all right, I get the number 1 pick. Yep. Brad is going to have the number 2 pick, and Gifford is number 3. So with my first pick in the 2023 Quentin Tarantino credits draft, I will select Reservoir Dogs.
All right, so Brad gets his number 1 overall pick.
I thought you might pick Pulp Fiction there. Do you know what my number 1 overall pick is?
Inglourious Bastards.
Inglourious Bastards. That is...
I get to pick for me and for Brad this whole thing.
Far and away my favorite movie, which contains, by the way, the greatest scene ever filmed in cinema, the first 20 minutes with Christoph Waltz and the French guy.
I just watched this again.
There's nothing better than that.
Yeah, it's so tense. And again, this comes back to him doing dialogue. It's just excellent dialogue.
So that movie goes on, and it's great after that too. And it has all your, your standard violence and all the stuff you expect. But that scene has none of that.
Nope.
It's just sheer suspense and writing and acting. Oh my God, the French guy because Christoph Waltz won an Oscar, but the other guy, he's amazing too.
Yeah.
So that's my pick. I'm glad you knew it.
Boy, this leaves me. Well, I got to get one of 2. I think I'll go Pulp Fiction.
Hoping you'd go a different route, but you didn't. I am going to go with Natural Born Killers.
You did the story for that.
Yeah, and it just says story, not like writer, but just story,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was interesting.
He has a credit. That's all that matters.
I know, it's on my list. Okay, so yeah, I got two more that I really hope to get here. Trying to figure out what Gifford's going to pick. I'm going to go with my second favorite one, which is his newest, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh, that's not what I thought you were going to take.
I thought that was so good.
It
And
was
again, not a lot of
extremely
violence in that one, like way less than usual until the
But
very
you're
end.
waiting for it the whole time, and then it finally shows up.
Yeah, but you're just so entertained watching it, and like nothing's happening. Like there's no plot, there's nothing going on, and like I can't stop watching. Like this is engrossing. I love
good.
it.
It's so good. Well, I was between Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill Volume 1 for my number one pick. So I'm going to take Kill Bill Volume 1,
Yep,
please.
You are definitely a fan of that.
Yes, sir.
I will take Jackie
Awesome.
Brown.
Yes.
Awesome.
All right. Hey, guys, I'm getting my top three.
Now,
Gifford, do you know what my next one is?
I thought you were going to take this for your second overall pick.
Well, I was back and forth on these two.
Are you going to go with Desperado?
You are correct.
Ah.
And that's a movie where he's in it, actually.
Yep. He's the
And I
pickup
do
guy.
love his role. His little role at the beginning of that is he's
So
perfect
good.
for it. I love it. He sets the stage for the story. And I just love that movie so much.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't be happier with my draft right now.
I thought you were taking that number 2.
Well, I didn't know what you might pick, so I wanted to take the
Nope.
bigger one.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take Django.
All right. I'm going to take, I'm not as much of a horror movie fan. Gifford, I know you are, but I did watch this one. I thought it was really good and well done. He was the executive producer for Hostel.
Very good pick. I am a huge fan of that movie. Yes, that would have been. I figured that would be like my 5th pick that I would just get at the end there, but that's an awesome pick.
Okay, so I'm going to pick a love-hate one now. This is a movie I used to think was maybe the best thing he was ever associated with, and I watched it a ton a long time ago and thought it was so great. I watched it like 2 or 3 years ago and could barely get through. I think I shut it off, actually. Mostly for one scene, but I did love it, and it is a pretty good movie overall. There's a lot of great characters in it, and that's True Romance.
Ah.
The
That
scene
was one
where
that I did not have written down.
he wrote it.
No, I know. I just didn't write it down for my 15.
The scene where there's other stuff that bugged me, I think, too, but where Patricia Arquette gets beaten so bad, it's like
Mhm.
I could not watch it, and it was like, my God, this is just ridiculous. But I used to love it, so hey.
Yep. Well, I am going to take Kill Bill Volume 2 with my pick there.
All right, I'll allow it.
Well, they are two separate. It was supposed to be one movie, and of course, it was 4+ hours long, so they made them split it into 2. Not as good as the first, but still very, very good. Big fan.
I don't think anybody's said this one yet, but we're near the end of the draft here, so I could have missed it. Did anybody say From Dusk Till Dawn
Nope.
yet? I'll take
Nope.
that.
Couldn't take it because I'd never seen it.
Really? Okay. I think I've only seen it once, but he wrote the screenplay and was also in it.
All right, so for my last pick, I've got 2 movies that he was the script doctor on.
Yes, I did see those.
And they're both great movies that
They
I
are.
love. So I'm going to take the one that is even more surprising to me that he was a script doctor for, and that is Crimson Tide.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
Yeah.
I don't know. So there's movies
didn't
he was
even
a writer.
find that on here.
Like he
Okay.
wrote True Romance and he wrote
Yep.
movies. And then he's a script doctor on some. And then for Natural Born Killers, it just says story. Like I'm assuming he had an idea that they took.
I'm assuming he had the basis of the idea.
So he's been associated in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This worked out better. I got all good ones here. That's great.
Well, I gotta say, I am extremely happy with my last pick here. I'm going with Four Rooms. This is a Tim Roth highlighted movie here. He's a bellboy in a hotel, and it's 4 short stories, and I think all of them are wonderful. And
That's one. Is it violent or is it different?
There's violence in it, but it's kind of different. It's funny, dark humor comedy stuff. Yeah. And he's
that's one that I never seen, but if I was going to watch any one of these, that would be the one I should go to, I think.
Please do. It is outstanding.
I'm surprised you didn't pick. I thought you were a big fan of like Grindhouse and Death Proof.
So
I've never seen those,
so Grindhouse is the combination of Planet Terror and Death Proof. Planet Terror I wasn't a big fan of. Death Proof I am. I have it on my list here. Kurt Russell is outstanding in it. I love kind of the twist in that one where he goes from being the aggressor to the victim. And Kurt Russell is just awesome in general. So that one was on my list, along with The Hateful Eight. I think were the last 2 that weren't mentioned in this.
Did you have? Well done. I'm surprised you didn't have. Did you have Sin City on your list?
I have not seen those movies.
Oh, I thought you would. I figured these are all movies I thought you not only saw but like really liked, and that's why I thought you'd be picking them, and I would have.
That's why I didn't have them on my list because I was like, God, I just haven't. And then what was the other one he was a script doctor for that was awesome?
The Rock.
The Rock. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome to The Rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had The Hateful Eight as my number 15 pick because it's the only other one I had seen. Okay. But I absolutely hated that movie. I didn't even watch it.
Oh, okay.
I think that's part of why I liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood so much. It's because it had been so long since I'd seen a movie of his that I really liked. I mean, Django was the last one.
Sure.
And then there were all these others that they weren't for me. And that was a big disappointment because I thought that one would be really good with the cast and everything, and I couldn't stand it.
I enjoyed it.
The only ones that we had that I wrote down, and this is where I was really stretching here just in case I needed it. He was a host on Saturday Night Live once.
Sure.
And there was some I remember some
thought
scene or
about
something that he was in.
What skits was he in?
I forget. I didn't write it down. I didn't figure it'd matter anyway. But there was something I recognized like from there. And then apparently he was an Elvis impersonator on the Golden Girls on one episode. And I thought if I need a last choice, that'll be a great one.
There you go.
Perfect.
That would have been great.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I hadn't seen it. I had no idea. Well, maybe I have seen it and just didn't even know.
Right? Yeah, you might have not known who he was.
Sure you have. Could be.
Uh-huh. Pete, you got any other ones?
I don't. No.
Okay.
Well, that worked out just fantastic, actually.
It did. I'm happy with my list.
Way to make us do it.
Yeah.
And now from 1974, we have Preacher Row with Standing on My Own 2 Feet.
Outstanding. You got to work on your Stephen Wright just a little bit.
I do. That was terrible, wasn't
You're not dry. You're not dry enough.
I know.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody.
Yep.
See you next week.
Bye.
No one's gonna comfort me. Sorry for what I have done. Sorry that your song is gone. 7 steps and it will be my last. Next time, tell me on my back. I turn and I look to you. I'm scared, but there's nothing I can do.